Okay, you're on the record, so anybody can join in if they want to. Let me just announce for everybody who wants to listen to mute their mics and they can participate. Just give us a few more minutes. I mean, seconds literally. Don't think it's
Sure.
going to take too
All
long.
right.
In terms of everything else, everything okay? You coping well with everything that's going on?
Oh, yes. Are you coping well with everything that
Yeah,
is
yeah,
going
yeah.
on?
We should be okay for now. Everybody's safe and sound. Lots of food,
Fantastic.
lots of hobbies, lots of things to do.
Sure.
So, okay. Let me just quickly tag everyone. So add everyone. Feel free to jump in the conference hall to listen to a conversation, but unless you want to say something, keep your mics off. Thank you. See you there. What? Yes, I'm sure. Discord keeps asking me if I'm sure that I want everybody in the server to see the
Yeah,
message.
it
I'm
does
like,
that to me
yes, I
as
am
well.
sure. I am very sure about everything I do. You don't have to ask me stupid
Absolutely.
questions. Fool! Okay, but I mean, people can always go back if they want to, and just take it down. Take it back a few notches if they want to catch up and stuff like that. Somebody who might be jumping in later. So,
Aha. All right. What is this? Hi everyone. I found a very good Tyrannosaurus. I would need some feedback. This is the most scientific accurate.
it's my
With
friend. He's trolling. So as you can tell, my
no,
response, yeah,
no.
he's trolling. He's trolling.
Yes.
He does
Just
this all the time. He waits for people to forget about it, right? Because he's not very active, so people forget who he is, and
uh-huh.
then he just posts some dumb shit like this.
All right. I guess it's a grizzly Tyrannosaurus. I like the idea.
Well, I don't care. I mean, not mean like not you, but I mean, I mean,
Of course, I I
it's
I
irrelevant.
understand. I understand. I
But do you want
understand.
to jump into the subject then? What's
All
up?
right.
You had some
So
questions, I presume. So do you
yeah,
wanna?
I had some questions
So
about.
let's do it one by one and step by step to make sure we are structured. I prefer to keep things very structured so we don't
Hmm.
make it a
Yeah,
mess.
I am
Like,
quite the opposite actually.
well,
Sorry for
this
the
is what we need to do. We
inconvenience.
need to be very kind of specific about every single point and make sure that we
Okay.
can get everything
All
covered
right.
properly and address it so that people who are listening can see that, even if we happen to disagree on something and provide whatever arguments, if there are any needed, we can still have a conversation. This is the point of this channel. My point of this
All right.
channel is not that
Fantastic.
everybody has to think like I think. My point is that if you don't think the way I think, but you're here, you can talk to me about it. So let's go ahead with that.
All right. So, um, at first, I need to point out why uh, do like the majority of the paleo community, prefer all this idea of theropods when there is actually a lot of evidence against it. I mean, not against theropods, of course.
So you want you might am I right that you want to try to understand why people are jumping on this regardless of
Yes,
the trail. Yeah, I can
yes,
answer
of
that
course.
very easily. Actually, it's a very easy question to answer. So
Please answer it. I'm
absolutely
confused.
yes. So basically, the best way to put it out is you have this sort of tribal divisions at this point in the day and age, which unfortunately happened in the paleo community as well. It's happening everywhere, and but to stay on topic here and avoid any politics or anything like that, it's important to note that every community has, the so-called camps, where people who have certain point of view are in one camp, people who have a different point of view are in the other. There are people who are also acting like mediators in between, so they try to kind of be diplomats to make sure that things don't go south between the two, and there are people who just simply don't care and just want to basically look at raw facts, and this is where I consider myself to be. And I don't consider myself to actually be in a specific camp, because that implies a dogmatic point of view, which I do not hold. Because dogma implies that you believe that regardless of what the evidence says, and you have to repeat that, or else you are not one of us. That's the dogmatic approach to it. And the proper approach to it, the scientific approach, is that you look at the evidence itself, and regardless of what anybody thinks or says about it, we look at the raw facts, while interpretations are subject to individual points of view and opinions sometimes. Some of them can be tested reliably and be concluded as part of that knowledge, because this is why you test things in science, right? It makes sense. We do it so that we can make it right. And but some of them don't. So we have to be honest. When they don't, we have to point that out, and we just accept what actually works. And the best way to do it is to test it against the existing evidence. And it's not always possible, especially in paleontology, because you have a lot of things that you will not be able to know. And even when you think you do, there's always going to be that one or two people who are going to just be rebellious and say, but that don't mean nothing, maybe it's this, they will just say maybe and something. It's always going to be maybe followed by something. And this is where we get to the point where you ask that question, why do people do that? Well, it's quite simple, really. It was something that is just done to kind of several reasons. First, it's because it's trendy, because it's just, people are just like that. We're human beings. We always jump around from one trend to another, fashion, etc. It reflects in how we think. It reflects in how we dress up. It's reflected in how we behave, in relationships. It reflects in how we approach subjects like science, politics, everything. And the problem is that we frequently do not separate the ideas that we find cool. For whatever reason, we may find them cool or not. It depends. You can have whatever position. That's perfectly fine. But we cannot separate that sometimes from what the actual facts objectively telling us. So there is objective way to look at it. That means that regardless of what somebody proposes or thinks or promotes, they still have to go through the same standard and length to demonstrate how their model works. And if they cannot do it, then it doesn't work, and therefore it's false. Because in science, in generally speaking, we never prove the negative, we prove the positive. The negative is accepted by default so long as the burden of proof lies on the positive. So, for example, so to not confuse you too much, for example, because I like to really say a lot of things about this, and sometimes people get thrown off by me rambling. So, for example, if I say, it's just going to be a random one, it doesn't have to make sense, it's just so that I can demonstrate it for you. Let's say somebody says birds have teeth. Let's just imagine that we never seen what a real bird looks like, right? Let's just say people say birds have teeth. So the person who made the claim is responsible to prove it and provide evidence to support it. So if I say, no, they did not, he cannot ask me to prove it because I cannot prove they did not have it. It's not possible to prove the negative because there is no evidence to even support the positive. So you always have the burden of proof to be on the positive claim before you can actually start going back and forth. So if he say, okay, so I found this evidence, and this evidence actually shows that there are birds that have teeth. So therefore, it is up to, but then if I decide that I want to continue and say, you know what, I don't think that's true, although you've provided evidence, I believe that this evidence actually shows something else. And then it's up to me to prove that my point is correct, to retaliate and, to retort or issue a rebuttal. Sometimes they say that as well a lot. You will hear that happen quite often. People talk about rebuttals. That's what it means when you have a contradiction, but it should be published in official form as well. This happens quite a lot of times as well, and it's perfectly normal. But then the burden of proof shifts to me. But initially, when people say dinosaurs should have extraoral tissue, the problem I have with this argument is that they just don't have the evidence. Because I do not like to say, I'm okay with people just having a go with each other and just talking about what arguments they believe make sense to support it, what arguments do not, go against it, and just go into this kind of dick measuring contest between these ideas. That's perfectly fine. You can have fun with it. But if I'm going to argue science, then I want you to actually demonstrate. Not you directly, I mean you as in like the metaphorical expression here.
Yes, I understand.
So the one who basically presents the position that dinosaurs, or theropods specifically, should have lips or extraoral tissue, they're responsible to present with evidence that supports that claim. So far they have not done that. So far all they are doing is just trying to make straw man arguments to basically connect it to it, to make it at least viable by implication, which is not evidence really. It's nothing really, and there has not been any publication done to date that can actually reliably test for any of the arguments. I will quote a scientist, very good scientist by the way.
His name is Thomas Carr, isn't he?
No, not Thomas Carr this time.
Oh, all right.
It's a different one actually. His name is Casey Holliday. He recently published something as well, but it's regarding something to do with extra, outgrowths. When you have these like areas.
Extra old tissues around the jaws.
Not all tissue, but it's more like. It's like, for example, if you have eyebrows, right, or nose areas, and you have extra
right.
like, keratinized, roughened areas or scutes or something like that, that grows. It's like something to do with that, but I don't remember details. But if I remember, I will link it if I haven't already. It's a very good paper.
Right.
And Casey Holliday is actually a specialist in soft tissue restorations, and generally, he made a very good point. He said something which I think a lot of people just have been missing. He said, guys, why don't we just stop writing blog posts and start writing papers? And present all the evidence and let it speak for itself. And if it works, it works.
Genuine good point. Now that I think about it, that's a really good point.
Yes, because the most important thing is it's not about what you believe and what you think you know in paleontology. However frustrating and annoying it can be, it's not about that. It's about what you can prove. Right? Just want to let that sink in a little bit. It's not about what you think or believe or want it to be. It's about what you can prove.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like evolution or science is going to care about your personal preferences.
No, it doesn't. It does not differentiate, it does not discriminate. It's objective reality. And, again, not to get too political, but if you want a classic example of equal treatment, look at natural selection. It does not discriminate.
Exactly.
And
that's a good point, man. Like, genuinely.
Well, it is what it is. We don't have to like it. We can be frustrated about it, or we can look at it from an adult point of view and say, okay, as an adult, it doesn't mean you have to be old enough to be like 18 plus or anything. You can be adult in your head anyway. I know people who are 15 and they think better than some of the 20-year-olds I've met. And I am a 35-year-old dude. I've met a lot of different people already, so I know what I'm talking about here. I don't want to boast, but I mean, just trust me on this. And what I mean to say about it is to the adult position here, mature position would be that if I'm not able to change this situation itself, if it's going to be the way it is, regardless of what I feel about it and what I think about it, the only thing I can change is my own attitude towards it, can't I? Because I can change that. It may be difficult. It might take me a long time to do it. But it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
It does.
Yeah, so it's very easy, really. When you start really kind of looking at it on a paper, it's actually very easy. But it's not very It's not very easy to do because as somebody who has gone through a lot of things like this, when I had to change, not just in paleontology, but generally, when it comes to views on certain subjects, just generally in everything, it's quite difficult being confronted with certain facts that completely trash and burn all your previously conceived ideas to the ground, and you just realize that the whole thing just went to the bin, basically. It just got thrown out the window, and you cannot go back, because once you know something, you cannot unknow it. You cannot unlearn something you know.
Have you ever been in that position yourself?
Me?
Yeah.
All my life. Every time. Well, I mean, all my life, as in like most of my young adult life.
Mm-hmm.
And I consider, like say young adult, I mean like from, like 17, 18 till about 25 roughly. And then after 25, 25, 26, it's like it changed a lot. Everything changed a lot. A lot of things changed. And it's the same in paleontology. I used to, many people who come to my channel or who don't actually do their research when they try to have a go at me, and they think that they just like totally annihilated me or roasted me, and then I clap back, and well, they are crickets after that. And but the thing is, they don't understand that I have once been in the same position they were as well. I am kind of the same guy who used to support the same ideas. The only difference is I basically just came back, and I was asked a few difficult questions by some other people. There was a few people who just asked me a few difficult questions because they just thought, why not? Like what do we know? Like, what do we really know? Not what we think we know. What do we really know about it? It was like 2015 sometime or something like that. I was a strong supporter of the idea at some point that, maybe T-Rex and Tyrannosaurids, maybe they did have filaments, because this and this, Eutyranus, etc. But they asked, but did they really? And I'm like, what do you mean? Pretty sure they did, right? And he's like, no, but did they really? And I'm like, sitting here like, well, okay, did they really? I find myself basically repeating the exact same question to myself, and I realize, okay, I haven't really looked into this, have I? And then I started looking into it, started coming across some blog posts. But okay, I was guilty. By the way, the reason why I say blog posts are not a good idea is because I once have been guilty of using blog posts, mistakenly so. And the reason, and I admit to it, I don't have a problem with it. So if any of these yahoos out there who think that, AK has used the blog post back then, there is like an exchange of comments, he used it, so, and you say, you're a hypocrite. No, I own it. I take responsibility. I used to do that. I learned from it, and I learned my lesson that this is not the right way to do it, because it was not enough. And
but I'm sorry, but at the time when Eutyranus and its filaments were discovered, did we have like a vast knowledge on scale impressions from Tyrannosaurids?
In fact, we already did.
Yeah, because I was thinking if we didn't at the time, I think it was kind of somewhat justified believing that was the integument that they had. But if we had evidence contradicting that, then it makes more sense to assume they'd have scales.
So what this means is we have several scenarios. In this particular case, I like to point out that it can be one of the several situations that we're dealing with. First, and this is based on a very, very limited perception, mind you that the phylogenetic brackets and cladistic system that is, the taxonomy around it as well is all based on what we actually see on the physical evidence. And it's not something that you can use as evidence to prove something. It's there to show that this is what is known, this is where we can recover the taxa from, this is where they are currently positioned, according to our best understanding. That does not, however, necessarily prove certain extraordinary claim. Because you know how they say, extraordinary claim requires extraordinary evidence. In which case, one of the following situations here will be true, or a combination of both. One of them is the Eutyranus and Proceratosaurid family, along with free-roaming taxa like D-long, etc. They are either not actually Tyrannosauroidea, they are mistakenly placed there. That's a possibility. I'm not saying it is that way. I'm saying it's a possibility.
Right. Yeah, I got confused there for a second.
No, don't get confused. I'm not saying they are. I'm saying they may be. It's a possibility. Right. Because the problem is we don't know as much about the clade overall to be able to make an accurate analysis. This is what is based on what is known, and what is known is not a lot.
Is there anything suggesting that they aren't in Tyrannosauroidea?
There are a few things I've noticed, some of the taxa, which means that they could just be specific to that taxa only, and it could be coincidence. But I pointed it out in one of my videos that there was a brain analysis, shape analysis, that showed that D-long paradoxes, I think it was, which is not a Proceratosaurid, it's just a free-roaming taxon. It's not allocated to any specific family, so people don't get it confused. And this taxon showed very strong similarities between the brain shapes of Maniraptorans, while Tyrannosaurids and Allosauroids and etc., who, at least those that were picked for a sample, they were all showing similarities and consistency between each other, but things like Deinonychus and D-long were the ones who were not very similar to those, they were similar with each other, and some other Dromaeosaurids. So which makes it very interesting that some people have actually verbally suggested that this could just be a matter of, a taxon sharing more Maniraptoran characteristics, but then again, we cannot prove that yet because, by we, I mean just generally in the community, it's not possible to prove it yet because it's D-long, as much as we like the preservation, it has a good preservation. Well, it's good as in like it's better than a lot of others. It has filaments as well, although we don't know how well they are preserved. I think they are average-ish. In some areas they are okay, in some areas they are not very well preserved. And unfortunately, I think the same thing is for Eutyrannus. Even the paper describing it says that it's not actually possible to truly determine the filamentous nature, but they have made a few suggestions, but they were not very definite. So it's another important thing. But the main thing I'm leading up to is that we don't have a lot of evidence and more sample material from D-long paradoxes to be able to see if we can prove that there is a relationship between them and Maniraptors, and thus justify that they have stronger relationship with each other than they do with Tyrannosauroidea. And then start looking at every other taxon from that whole family aside from the true Tyrannosaurida. So what the second thing that I was going to suggest is that they might truly be Tyrannosauroidea, so everything might be just as it is, but the thing is, which we do not realize and which we cannot predict, as we can see, and is evident right here, is that relationships do not necessarily mean that they share common looks.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's always true. Like,
if you look at the body plan, exactly. Sorry, do you want to have a go?
Reliable. Yeah, I was just gonna say that phylogenetics aren't always reliable arguments regarding the looks of animals.
No,
because we can look at many different extinct genre of animals and compare them to modern day animals that they are related to, and some of which have a much shorter time difference between now and then compared to, let's say, T-Rex and Eutyrannus, who are separated by 40 million years. So the differences might very much greater in that regard. So basically what I'm saying is just phylogenetics aren't that reliable because a lot changes in the course of evolution.
The thing to note as well is that being closely related to does not necessarily equal to looking similar. Because a lot of these relationships, they are established by features that would not probably be too obvious or apparent on external when the animal is restored to its flesh and muscle. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, and you will find a very interesting coincidence actually, which I have noticed a lot of times, that if you look at, say, something like a Eutyrannus huali or Guanlong, or then you look at Tyrannosaurus rex, and then you look at Giganotosaurus carolini, or say something else, Mapiosaurus rosei, you will notice that Tyrannosaurus rex and Giganotosaurus carolini, along with similarly Giganotosaurini clade, Carcharodontosaurids, they share more similarities in body plan in general than they do between T-Rex and Eutyrannus.
Right.
They are a lot more similar.
It's not just because of the generic big theropod hunts big prey body plan. Isn't that just the reason why, or
Well,
Is there-
there's a very
it-
interesting point to it. The thing is that generally it's also obviously it's a convergent evolution
yeah,
case.
yeah, exactly.
Probably
That's
it's
what
a
I was looking
tendency.
for. Yeah.
Because it seems that to me it seems again it's a suggestion at this point. I'm not going to make any definitive claims. It's just something that I am personally observing from based on the timeline of development and the time periods when they were all cited and recorded so far, is that towards the end of the Allosauroidea family, big family clade, we see tendency towards the increase in the size of the body overall, in the size of the head, and decrease in the forelimb size. So we see a more favorable, robust approach to predatory dinosaurs, and it's the same tendency that repeats in Tyrannosaurida, which starts off with smaller and less stocky animals in some cases, but then it kind of just goes a couple levels up in cases like Tyrannosaurus and Tarbosaurus, for example. So it's very interesting to observe, and it's definitely something that is very interesting in the sense that if you are actually not very well familiar with the subject and you don't really know what is going on and you don't know all the details, you might actually be thinking that Giganotosaurus and T-Rex might just be close cousins to each other, but in true form they're not really. This is like saying, how some... it's a very classic example. I'll give you a very good one, by the way. Real life example. You don't have to go further than that. When I was growing up, I used to go to my grandfather's village outside of town, and they had lots of snakes there. And I used to have absolute blast catching these snakes, and I knew everything about them because the local species were very limited in the quantity, so there was only like maybe 3 of them altogether. And one of them was the so-called the Eurasian grass snake. The other one is called the common viper, or steppe viper. Sometimes people use it as a name. And there are ways to tell them apart. But then somebody said something very weird to me that I knew, and it seemed obvious to me, but for some reason people were believing in it without even checking. They said, you have to be careful with the grass snake. And I'm like, why? What's wrong? They're not venomous. But the problem is they started saying that but they can crossbreed with the vipers. And I'm thinking to myself, but that's not possible. And they're like, why? Because vipers are from a different family completely, and they give live birth. And grass snake is a completely different family from it, and it lays eggs. There's no way they can crossbreed. It's just impossible. I mean, you have better chance of breeding chimpanzee with a human being than you have with these two.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, well, it's true. He's right.
But on the outside, people don't know this. People will look at it and they will think that these things can truly be interacting in that way. We know that's not true, but they don't. And then the whole village, by the time it was too late, obviously the whole village was actually terrified of these snakes that looked like they were a crossbreed, but they were just a different species of another snake, which was perfectly harmless. And they almost exterminated the whole population of them because they were scared of them, because they thought that their children were gonna play there and could get bit. But that's true. It's a true story. I'm not even making it up. It's completely true, 100%. And this is what's important to understand, that relationships in the phylogenetic tree are a lot more complex, which is why I always try to isolate that away from things, and I always want to focus on the first and foremost important point. What evidence do you have to support it? And then, if you don't have any evidence, how do you approach it? Because sometimes it's a matter of two people just simply agreeing to disagree, because some people like to, again, go more conservative on reconstructions. Other people try to go a bit more liberal on reconstructions. This is something that me and Jason have brought up. Jason is the guy who is the paleontologist that I interviewed a while back, so we've got 2 videos up back in the days, so you can check them out as well on my channel. And he said that he made a very good point, that there are usually different ways to approach this. And let's say the more conservative approach would be basically the minimalistic approach, but I don't favor the minimalistic approach in the sense that here's where I slightly, but not always, disagree. I can see where it's coming from, but I would probably sometimes be a little bit more liberal in some areas when it comes to reconstructions. This is where Dr. Thomas Carr and I slightly diverge, is that he literally does it millimeter by millimeter, ruler, sort of, like point by point, which is fair, and it's actually kind of correct in a way that it can be productive, but it can be counterproductive because it shuts down a lot of the dialogue if you try to explore other options. Although recently when we talked, he actually changed a lot of his positions, because I remember when I brought it up, like say 2 years ago, he would just pretty much just shut it down immediately. And then recently he just kind of like was scratching his head and be like, you know what, you may have a point there, sir. Like he was a lot more open to it. So in certain areas, it's irrelevant to this discussion, but it's just some other things that we were just discussing in private. But the whole point is that he also has shown that, things can be a lot more complicated than they might look on the outside. And the problem is that what we make as an audience and as a consumer, because technically we're not the ones producing paperwork, we are just consuming these so-called products, and we as a consumer, although we don't pay for it, technically, most of the times we don't pay, and this is behind the paywall, but we don't really pay for it. I understand that. We don't give them our money most of the time. They get paid by their institutions, so it's not really fair to say that, we don't have any taxes to pay them, so therefore we can demand something. No, we don't. But I think we can all agree that it's important to always call to kind of, go back to the basics and foundation of the argument. It's looking at the objective reality and facts and not let anything else get in the way. I mean, because it's not because I want to win the argument, I don't care, actually. I mean, it doesn't mean anything to me, winning or losing arguments, it doesn't mean anything to me. What means to me is that if I know the truth and I can demonstrate it, but somebody else ignores it and tries to force their opinion to be the primary target and focus of it instead, then I will have a problem, because I do not like ignoring facts for the sake of the feelings. I'm not that kind of person.
Yeah. You don't say.
Yes. So, okay, I want to give a chance to some other people if they want to chime in with questions or comments, because I've been talking for too long. So, anybody else want to have a go? Hello?
I'm not sure. I think you.
Yes. Sorry. We got a message. We'll just say Fook Dino Hazard. Yeah, you have a go, mate. Everybody else, shut up. Wait, hold on. Is he gonna be typing or is he gonna be actually?
No
talking?
idea.
I guess typing. Okay, because I thought he was gonna be actually going to the voice. Just want to see what's going on. So we have another maybe 20 something minutes before I have to go into my next thing, but
right.
I hope this will be plenty to cover and address all the main points. So let's deal with this one first, once he posts his question or comment, and then we'll get probably Scorpio if he wants to jump in as well, because he had a problem. I'm pretty sure he had something else to say.
Sure, I did.
So let's just give this guy a chance first. Fuck, I know. My god.
Am I missing something here? Because I don't get
it's Brazil. Okay, so yeah, there we are. So no problem. Don't worry about your English. I wanted to make sure, by the way, that guys, as well, English is not my first language, regardless of, even if you think that I speak good English, I actually do not speak English as my first language.
Yeah, so, same here.
We are more or less in the same boat here. So I think it's pretty much safe to assume that many of us here do not have English as their first spoken language. A Brazilian guy said that Eutyrannus and Tyrannosaurus could have the same type of structure, and guess what he examples? Cats and dogs have fur, so therefore Eutyrannus. Well, that's a very short-sighted argument straight away. For one, mammals have nothing to do with it. There are several problems with the mammalian argument. First of all, let's separate this argument for now, and before we strip it and dismantle it, I want to actually address again, go back to the core, always bring back to the core. What is the evidence? They could have, again, could have is a more, you notice the rhetoric, could have, if I am going to presume that Dino Hazard accurately quoted the phrase, then this basically means that we're using the rhetoric of could have as if it has happened. So this is not an argument. It could have, maybe, yeah, okay. It's an opinion. That's not an argument. An argument would be they had these structures and here is the evidence for it. That's an argument. So that's already from the get-go you can see that there's a lot of things wrong with that very statement, even before I start looking into the cats and dogs. I mean, sure, common sparrow has feathers, sure. I don't know.
Why don't crocs have feathers too?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the funny thing is that crocodilians, by the way, crocodilians, they do have genetic code for it. It just never manifests.
Is it because they're archosaurs?
Something like that, but we don't know why. We just know it's there.
Right.
Yeah. Hold on. There's some papers suggesting that filaments in Archosaurus, in animals, right? In Archosaurus were basically a thing in the common ancestor for both birds, dinosaurs, and pterosaurs and other
I think
archosaurs.
there was a recent paper as well.
Yeah, there was a recent paper.
That actually suggests not quite the same thing. It suggests that the issue itself is actually a lot more complex. So the assumption that they all had a common ancestor who was filamentous is actually very vague, and it's just basically when you look down a chasm and it's pitch black, you can also imagine what sort of things are down there, but you don't know until you go down there. So my point is that we haven't gone down there yet. So
Sad.
that's the main thing to address here. So there were some ideas, of course, previously. You were right to say that. There were some who suggested that, but as of today, again, unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me because everything here is like live, happening. So I want us to focus on conversation more than spending hours looking for where the paperwork is. But the point I'm trying to address here is that it still doesn't actually prove a whole lot in terms of, it doesn't justify a lot of things, because let's look at it this way. Even if the common ancestor, let's just assume that it's 100% true, the common ancestor had filaments. Let's just make it a true statement for the purpose of this argument. And roll with it. Forget all the buts and ifs, just go with it. And we can see clearly by objective facts and evidence, empirical evidence, that quite a lot of archosauromorphs did not follow down that path. So this in itself was already evident that they have abandoned certain approaches when it comes to the evolutionary aspect of it. The problem is that we always, as rational people generally, we try to understand why, and a lot of things we just won't be able to answer why. I'll give you a good example why it's important to not dwell too much on why it is, but simply just look at it is, full stop, basically. There may be some idea, there may be some ways you can explain it, some cases it's possible, but a lot of cases you will not be able to, and when you're not able to, it's okay. But remember one thing, bumblebee, the insect bumblebee, right?
Sure. I do.
It's the fattest insect in terms of proportions you can ever come up with, and in body proportions to its body and abdomen and everything, and to its wings. So from the physical and aerodynamics law standpoint, it should be physically impossible for bumblebee to fly, and yet they do. Nobody has been able to figure that out yet, by the way, as far as I know.
This was also a quote in the B movie as well. This is an animated movie by DreamWorks. They started off the movie saying exactly this.
Yeah, and it's
You
as far as
gotta
I'm
be
aware
kidding
of.
me.
I have not seen anything else to prove it, but so far, what I know is that nobody knows. Nobody has a clue why it's able to fly. Like, how does it do that? You know, we complain sometimes when we see, you know, like these dragons, sometimes the old school fantasy dragons that have small wings and they have like massive big bodies, big heads, big bones, everything, osteoderms like everywhere where it can and cannot fit. Just, you know, just the crazy awesome bro porn fantasy of some sort. And then you look at his wings and we start ranting like, but how does this thing fly? It's bloody heavy. And then you look at Bumblebee and you're like, so that's how, except that we still don't know how. So
insane.
It's a catch-22 basically situation here. So yeah, fantasy writers out there, maybe you might actually be getting off a little bit easier than you may have previously thought. So if somebody tells you that this thing cannot fly, you can always say Bumblebee.
Look at the bumblebee.
Yeah, just look at the bumblebee.
It's the fattest insect. Like, that is a quote I will never forget in my entire life.
But that's the problem. It's true.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm sorry, but it's true.
Yes, alright.
Love it or
Part
hate
of
it.
this.
He's spitting facts. He's spitting facts.
And, I mean, look at it this way. Dragonfly, it's bigger than a bumblebee, but it's a slender insect. It doesn't have an all-round kind of, you know, the proportions of wings, if you notice, they are very well proportioned. The body build is very light as well, and it kind of favors very good aerodynamics. But if you look at Bumblebee, it's the exact opposite, and yet they fly like crazy. Like, I have a back garden, I see them every day. They sometimes ram into my window.
Right.
Just saying hello.
So there we go. So and then of course when it comes to mammals, to go to the second part of this, cats and dogs have fur. The thing is, you already have a lot of living examples of mammals that are very closely related, and you kind of have equivalents already. We don't have any archosauromorphs from Dinosauria to be able to truly kind of support it. Because, see, there's another problem where we get a lot of arguments when people start saying, but birds are dinosaurs, right? Well, I like to say, I don't like to go, no, they're not. I don't like to say, yes, they are. I just say, yes, but no, yes, but no, but yes. It's complicated.
It's complicated, just leave it at that.
The status of that relationship is, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Relationship status, birds,
basically,
birds and dinosaurs.
Are dinosaurs.
Yes, there's like, you know, people that are like, yeah, this person dating this person is married to this person, and then you have birds and dinosaurs, and in between you have, it's complicated.
But no, I think birds are dinosaurs, but not all dinosaurs are birds. That's basically...
Well,
It's
dinosaurs
generally-
aren't birds, you know, it's just the other way around.
Yeah.
Because, like, you wouldn't look at Argentinosaurus and be like, hey, that's a cute little bird. Like, you wouldn't say that.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. So the thing is, the reason why I say that is because the evolutionary line that birds went down is just so divergent, you know, from their dinosaurian ancestry. So it's like, it's almost like saying that the common ancestor of, I don't know, dinosaurs and all of the ornithodyrans, etc., like there's some kind of common ancestor, and you could just say that's a dinosaur and that's this. Or you could say the other way around. You could say that all of these more basal archosauromorphs, and you could say dinosaurs are basically that. So they kind of are, but they're not. But they are, but they're not really. Doesn't make sense. So if you were to kind of just basically shift the time frame and look at basically something else, something like, say, if you took dinosaurs, the non-avian dinosaurs, and take it back a few notches and look at their ancestor before the split occurred, you know, then you would find yourself in exactly the same situation with dinosaurs in relationship to that group of their ancestors, in the same way as you find birds to dinosaurs. In a way, I'm obviously simplifying it. I'm probably getting a few things wrong there and then. That's in case Jeffrey is listening or will be listening, because he will definitely point something out if he was here. But generally speaking, see, I have to be very careful because even my own friends sometimes they roast me over it. So, but
that's something I'd like to see.
But that's the point. I mean, we do it not because we are malicious. We do it because we are looking at. We're challenging the arguments. We're challenging every argument. It's okay because when this is the problem I have with how these arguments are conducted, especially that's why I don't like Twitter. I actually deleted my account on Twitter recently.
Really?
Yeah, I just told it to get fucked.
I didn't account in the first place.
It's just so like pointless. It's just so pointless, and because here's the problem. Every time I got into any kind of discussion, or I cannot even call it a discussion to be honest, on Twitter, but let's call it a discussion for the sake of, being classy and shit.
Yeah.
But basically, we always end up in this situation where somehow when the other side that has nothing else to respond with, instead of saying, you know what, let me kind of sit on it for a bit, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a perfectly normal response. It's a valid response. When you see that your argument is getting to the point where it's pretty much dead end, where it's clearly flawed. And by the way, this has actually happened with me and Jeffrey at some point. Before I kind of was getting into, even before I created my channel, we started communicating, and just randomly on Facebook I commented something and then he responded to my comment, and he said something very interesting. I don't remember what it was. It was too long as always, but so because it's Jeffrey. But sorry, I have to.
I hope he hears this.
Yeah, he will. You know what, guys? Let's upload this to the channel. Actually, I think it's a good podcast because instead of just heated arguments or anything, it's actually just a conversation.
It's very chill and very
it's very chill. So I think we should upload it, and if only it's just for the reason so that Jeffrey can hear me occasionally throwing, berries at him.
A little bit of shade towards Jeffrey.
Not shade. I mean, we don't really throw shade. Berries, as in like it doesn't mean harm, but you still have to clean it up after that. That's why I say berries. But yeah, anyway. It's the problem with these arguments on Twitter is that they start saying, okay, so you are attacking me. So somehow it becomes my attempt to personally attack somebody. Why? I don't know. I don't care. I don't care who you are in real life. I don't care about attacking you in person. I don't know what character you are. I care only about you being intellectually honest in this conversation. If you have a problem with your personal things, maybe you had a fight with your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. I don't care. That's not my problem. I want you to focus on the argument and the conversation. If you can't, just leave it, let it breathe, just chill a little bit and then come back to it later. That's the benefit of having these kind of online discussions, that you can always leave it for a bit, sit on it a little bit, and then come back to it. And this is why we have to always train ourselves in live conversations like this to think before we respond with something, because it kind of pushes us to kind of be a little bit more, how do I say this? To be a bit smarter about how we do that. And for a good reason, because, as much as I am an asshole on the internet, I don't want to be a dumb asshole on the internet. There's a difference between being an asshole and the dumbest one. Because, it's okay to be dumb, it's okay to be an asshole, but being a dumb asshole is like the total new low.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, as I say as well, this content is not for little kids. We use words sometimes here, so, everybody who don't like it, just chill. Just chill.
Chill out.
Just chill. It's all good. We're just having a bit of fun here. Yeah,
Exactly.
there we go. So now the next thing I wanted to say is that it's very it's very easy to really point out the basic things, like this, because once you start going back to the core, most of the arguments fall apart because people use appeal to authority. This is my next thing that I always hate. This rant about that I always have about people always saying, he said this, therefore it must be true.
Oof.
And then they try to say, oh, but he does this, and then they put this, the pointy finger in the air, but he said this, my this guy, this girl, whatever, they just pick their favorite and they just roll with it, And then for some reason they assume everybody else does the same, although that's not really what happens here. But, it's just a very weird kind of way of looking at it. And I always think, okay, this is very interesting because I'll give you a classic example. You know how Dr. Mark Whitten has had this blog post written about the idea that... I mean, look, do I blame the guy for writing it? No. He has the right to write it. He's a scientist as well, whatever. He doesn't have to be a scientist. He can write whatever he wants. He's a free person. You know what I mean? He can write whatever the fuck he wants. So anybody who thinks he should not have the right to write it can get fucked. But what I mean to say here is, just because he wrote something doesn't prove anything.
Yeah, doesn't mean it's correct.
It just means that he's sharing his opinion. He gives you something to think about, and that's what you're meant to be doing. You're meant to be thinking about it. You're meant to be looking at it and just saying, okay, there's this way. But then what if tomorrow Dr. Whitten decided, you know what? Actually, I think we're not giving enough credit and attention to the more conservative approach of reconstructions. Are they going to then say that now, does that mean that because their argument was all about he said, she said, so now it kind of falls apart, doesn't it? Because now their very appeal to authority changed their view. So it kind of falls apart, doesn't it? Because there's no objectivity here.
Yeah, and like we were talking about this not too long ago as well.
Of course. Yeah. And the funny thing is, it actually happened. He did say something. I think somebody thrown me a screenshot on Twitter at one point and said, hey, this is very interesting. Look, Marcus said this, that this is this. And I'm like, well, yeah, good on him. I mean, it means that he's definitely a better person maybe than I once have thought, perhaps. Because maybe I wasn't very high of the opinion in terms of how his approach is, not better person, but more of how he approaches the subject. But then I look at this and I'm like, you know what? Maybe he has a thing. Maybe he has a point. You know what I mean? He might have a point. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I don't care and I don't attack him as a person. I look at the whole premise. You can just remove his name from it and just make it a person A, person B, whatever. Just remove any kind of object of personality from there and just look at it in isolation. Let's say it's a blog post made by some author. Make it an anonymous author, by the way, if you wish. And it's the same argument still works. The point is, it's an opinion, which is perfectly fine, but opinions are not facts. You can have opinions based on facts, sure, but as Casey Holliday said a while back, that maybe we should invest more time and effort into writing papers instead of writing blogs.
Yeah, that's a really good point, I find.
I mean, why not? If you have the opinions and we want them to be represented and we have evidence to support them, why don't we write a paper? Do you know what else I want people to know from this? In fact, in case I haven't already made that clear. You know that, Scorpy specifically, you might be particularly fond of this idea, in case you didn't know. Did you know that you could sit down right now, if you wanted to, write a paper and have it published? Did you know that?
Yeah, I guess.
You can. There is a but.
Yeah, here comes
and I will tell you what it is, and that has nothing to do with you having PhD, by the way. You don't have to have a PhD to be able to write a paper. There are specific conditions that you need to meet regardless of your background. There's a standard. So you have to meet the standard, and in details, I don't know what it is, but Jason and Jeffrey would be able to tell more. But we can do that discussion later on with them if you want. And but if you meet a certain standard when you write a paper, you can publish it. So long as you are clearly, demonstrating, the path of how you arrived from point A to point Z. So a lot of not enough time is actually given and not enough attention is given to how the conclusion was achieved. For example, there are different ways of looking at it. The guy A just whacked the guy B. So in isolation, what we know is that one of the guys got whacked by the other guy. But what we don't know is how that actually happened. And when we start examining the possibilities, a lot of things can just come up that will be a lot more interesting and complicated than in isolation, right? And it's the same thing here. I mean, obviously I'm using extremely extreme examples, I would say, butter examples, but it's just to demonstrate the point. It's just to demonstrate the point and just to remind that you don't have to have a PhD to write a paper, because there is no requirement for it. Anybody can write a paper because anybody can actually fulfill and meet the standards. What PhD does, however, is that it gives you the tools and educational tools specifically necessary and resources in order to make it happen for you easier than anybody else. That's the only difference, to my understanding, because it's going to take you less time, because you're going to be better equipped to know what you're doing. You might potentially have access to specific resources like funds or some sort, or institutions who will help you to conduct certain researches. It will be easier for you to get it arranged. It will take less time for you to do it. It will cost you potentially less as well, maybe even free of charge, maybe not, depends. So all of these things are, to be taken into account, but the main point is that even I can write a paper if I wanted to, I just don't want to. Because it's a lot of stuff that you have to understand the technical process of, and that's when I say that it's about the standard. If you can meet the standard and justify why the paper is being written, what is it meant to actually contribute? Because its point of the paper is to contribute into scientific knowledge of what we know and what we don't. So guys, I will have to start wrapping up, but if you have any last minute comments and questions, spit them out now, and let's have a quick chat about that, and then we'll have to wrap up because I will be late for my next appointment, so to speak.
I love most, if not all, of your videos, and especially when it includes Joshua Valsay. I'm just looking forward to see if there will ever be another mammoth theme video on your channel, because I really enjoyed those, and I love my proboscideans.
Okay, Josh, if you're listening to this podcast, maybe next time we should just do another one about mammoths. I don't know what exactly we're going to be looking at, but we can come up with something just to make an excuse for it, So why not? Anything else?
No, not really. How's it going with your models that you're making?
I have been very slow as of late. I admit it. Sometimes because of laziness, sometimes because during this whole pandemic thing, I frequently find myself playing games together with my cousins almost every evening, and now I'm gonna have to try to self-discipline a little bit so I can be more productive. But generally speaking, it's not bad. I think I've got past the most annoying and difficult part on my Allosaurus, so I might actually be able to speed this up a little bit.
All right.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, it will be nice to see it when it's done. I'll be honest with you, I am very happy with it so far, as in just how the basic shape looks. So it's just a matter of making sure that I get all the detail done ASAP before obviously the clay loses its grip, and then bake it to make sure it's solid, and then after that we can start, hopefully, if I get the money, then I can make it into a model kit and we can actually upgrade it and see what it looks like in a way of resin kit and eventually a fully built and painted model.
Right. I'm looking forward to it. I really think you're talented, and I really enjoy seeing your work.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoying it too.
Oh yeah, like definitely.
Anything else?
Mm,
Did you have a Scorp? Did you have any questions or points that you may want to bring up and left unaddressed before I go? Just to make sure that we've covered everything. Because originally it was you who wanted to address certain things, so I wanted to make sure that you are happy with everything before I walk away.
I actually have a slight concern about how we animals.
About how we what?
Reconstruct faces of theropods.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so how do I start this? In page 21 of Cartel 2017,
Yeah?
the scientist states that, I quote, the texture is identical to that of Tyrannosaurids, except the entire face of crocodilians is coarse in texture, right?
Is what?
Coarse in texture.
Coarse, yeah.
Yeah, coarse. But if... okay. So this is why we reconstruct faces of theropods with these big scales, because
There is okay. I see where you're going with this. So, there is. I think it's worthy of noting that we only know specifically what a Tyrannosaurid face would have looked like based on that find because it's a Daspletosaurus.
yeah.
We know that's what the Daspletosaurus looks like, right? I'm stripping it to the base core right now.
All right, but
So
there's a problem to that. If we compare these, faces with the ones found in crocs, why do we give them scales? Because crocs don't have scales on their faces.
that's not the point. They don't say they have scales. They say it's a scale-like, which means it's a resemblance. Resemblance does not mean the same thing. It's a very tricky rhetoric that a lot of people fall into, and that's one of the things I've noticed that people misread, and that's perfectly fine. I'm hoping that I'm able to point that out as well to the benefit of everyone else who's listening. That don't confuse the points between looking alike and resembling. They don't make a claim that this is what it is. They are saying this is what it's most resemblant of or alike to. Doesn't mean it might be the same thing though.
This does raise. Excuse me. Continue.
There's no issue in that. Okay, so there's also this thing regarding numbers in foramina in each jaw bone. In example, so where should I? It's this paper, Mohat et al. 2009.
She's never made a paper. It was just a thesis. It's not a paper. It's not a paper of publication in the scientific journal. It's just a thesis. And also, this was published before anything else. So everything that she has done was not taken into account. The things that have already become known. And I believe she may have made a follow-up statement to that, addressing it just so that people would shut up about it. But I don't have it at hand, but I'm pretty sure she addressed it. I mean, people just can't leave the poor girl alone. I mean, she's already married and got kids and everything, and people are still like hounding her over this. I can't believe this. But to give you a very brief idea, it was Jason, by the way, who knows more because Jason is more familiar with her personally. So what I understood, at least, that Ashley later on addressed this claim that there was... Well, first of all, you have to understand that the original claim that she made was a work in progress. It was not a finalized product. It was it never got past peer review. It never got made into the publications. It's just people who basically using this claim for the wrong intentions, obviously, to support the desired narrative over the objective reality. And she was kind enough to address it in her own way, but basically she addressed it. People don't make anything out of it. They ignored it because you know how it is. People cherry pick, and it's okay. I have no problem with them doing it. What I have a problem with is when they do it and they come to me and tell me that this is how it is, which I say no.
Okay, are we talking about the same thing? I'm talking about that rule of thought in foramina.
Sorry?
He was talking
You know,
about the foramina and the jaw.
the rule of thought in foramina. Can I tell it to you if you forgot it or something? Maybe.
Well, if it's
Because
2009 thesis, that's what I know it is, because that's the only one I've
Because
heard of.
there's something along the lines of external tissues if the animal has less than 50 or foramina in its teeth or in its jawbone. Sorry, right? If it has ball tissues, if it's in between 50 and 100 to say the least,
I'm
and only if they have 100 or more foramina in their jawbones, like crocodilians today, it's a fair case to say that these animals
I,
were lipless.
last I checked, foramina themselves cannot be only used to determine lips. I might be wrong on this, but
Mm-hmm.
last I checked, you can't just base it off of the amount of
Yeah, it's
foramina.
not a reliable method.
Yeah, exactly. I
Also,
think
you don't. The other problem is you don't have any actual evidence to support it. So
Mhm.
for it to be true, you have to actually have evidence to support it.
I think Tracy Ford commented on this in his paper, tactile faced theropod.
Yeah.
They're basically what they did is basically they both made their own opinions known, so to speak. But generally
Mhm.
speaking, I want to go back to the core. Where is the evidence?
Yeah. What did you think of Tracy's paper, AK?
I read it a very long time ago, like literally ages ago, and I can sort of see where he's coming from. But of course, it's just the way I like to look at things is, and I'm being very strict here in general, that I want to actually see, you know, I mean, he's right to criticize the notion because
Right.
the problem is, what's the point of? I mean, okay, it's a very stretched kind of thing for me to probably go that way, but what is the point of rebutting something that is not even a something yet? Does that make
Right.
sense? Because there is not,
Yeah.
there's absolutely nothing yet to rebut.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that I kind of thought that maybe the angle, the way he went with it, was a little bit not quite the way I would have gone about it. Basically, I would have focused more on not saying that therefore it's not likely that they had them, but more so what the evidence shows, what relationship does it have with any other archosaurs, and
Right.
reliably try to test, okay, is the so-called argument for being aquatic, semi-aquatic reliable, which I know it's not, and everybody else
Yeah,
who
it's
has already
that
done research,
neopredator
it's not a
behavior,
reliable
right?
argument because there is no data that supports that particular case.
Right.
Because there are many
Yeah.
instances that contradicts that case in real life as well, when it comes to crocodilians as well. And then you can make an argument that maybe they had specific conditions or organs or something, you know, that allows them to go through that without any negative side effects to their dentition. But then you're kind of going down the rabbit hole of saying that if the archosaurs in general might, you know, this could have been a very easy case to be made that archosaurs in general might have had some kind of adaptation. Because that's the problem thing. We cannot predict how they would have dealt with this. We cannot predict whether or not they would have taken regular baths. Maybe they had other ways. You know how geckos don't have eyelids and they have to keep their eyes wet.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
lick them. If the geckos went extinct and somebody like our kids or whatever in days to come, they've discovered gecko skeletons, do you think they would have ever guessed that there are only ways they could have? They would have thought that they had eyelids, by the way, if they had other relatives, because you see some
Yeah.
geckos do
Right.
have eyelids, some of
Yeah.
them don't. And when you start really examining the premise of the argument and compare it, you are going to find a lot of catch-22 situations here. And this is my main pet peeve when it comes to, you know, dick measuring contest between who has better arguments, rather than just going back to the core and saying, okay, do we have the evidence? If we don't have the evidence, then we treat it as non-existent until we find the evidence.
No, it's completely fair.
Well, this is science.
Yeah, exactly. However, this does raise another question I had that I completely forgot about earlier.
Yeah, go for it.
Have you ever thought about making a video itself, specifically focusing on the likelihood of lips? or
maybe
is it not just
name
it's
about
just not
soft
worth
tissue.
talking about?
In all honesty, I don't think it's really worth talking about, and here's the reason why. I think it's just this is getting too much attention than, in my opinion, it deserves, personally, because something that doesn't have any evidence to support it, it's just always gonna, everything, because you know how I am, I always go back to the very core argument. I don't go into these what if and this. I like to go what if when it comes to, okay, so we found this dinosaur here. Does that mean that it could have lived geographically here? Could they have spread here? You know, like I've done with my Russian Tyrannosaurid material, you know? Like, this is something that kind of leaves a lot of room to discuss, and it's genuinely captivating and interesting. I personally cannot understand what's so captivating about discussing something that we, for all the intents and purposes, we probably never actually happened, never existed in them. What I mean by that is presence of the so-called lips or external tissues, the function of which would be also quite obscure to me as well, even if it existed. But again, if it existed, fine. Why is a different question. That's a bumblebee argument all over again. But the question is, do we have the evidence? And every time if I make the video for it, I will always keep coming back, and the answer will always be no, there is no evidence. So what's the point? If it's kind of like, you know, I don't know, man. I find that there is a lot more interesting and more productive things to examine, which actually have more tangible, evidence and material to it, which needs to get more attention, in my opinion, in general, instead of trying to just focus on things that are just all about debunking trends. And this is one of the things that I kind of pisses me off a little bit about where some areas of the community are going to. It's kind of degrading to this, you know, mudslinging, dick measuring kind of contest, instead of actually combining the efforts to learn the truth. People are just making it a shit show, which I don't like.
There's very few civil people left debating.
Yeah, I find this particular attitude to it, in my opinion, is very disrespectful to subject. I want this to actually be true to itself. And this is why a lot of times I refuse to really kind of delve too deep into it, because I already gave my point, and my point is, if you don't have the evidence, you cannot science. If you want to science, you got the evidence.
Yeah, so, like, for example, earlier today I was having a debate on which is the largest theropod, and it was such a shit show.
It's always this. Oh my god, tell me about it. Tell me about it.
People are saying, no, it's Spinosaurus. Spinosaurus is bigger, and they're using the outdated
then Giganotosaurus, then something else, something else.
They're saying Spinosaurus weighs 20 tons, even though it's such an outdated estimate.
Of course, because somebody has actually gone back in time and put the scales under it and be like, could you step over here, please? 22 tons, thank you, okay, I'll be back.
It's insane, and they seem to refuse to believe that animals and most things in science, when it comes to deciding how big it is, it's done by mass. They did not seem to believe that, and it was very frustrating to deal with that.
And the other problem that they don't consider is that you are, a lot of times, when you say, what's the largest? What's the criteria, and how do you compare? Do you compare it by, let's say 3 different values: height, length, and mass? So let's say if the 2 of them exceed the other, then this one is bigger, right? So it sounds good on the paper, doesn't it? But there's a problem. There is a problem. I'll give you an example. How much does an adult Triceratops weigh, roughly?
Well, according to GDI, it's like 6 to 7 tons.
6 to 7 tons, roughly.
Yeah, according to the latest GDI.
I'm sorry, but IK Rex got out, and I didn't hear what animal you're actually talking about.
He was asking how much does an adult Triceratops roughly weigh.
Triceratops.
I've
been hearing stuff like 14 tons.
Yeah, exactly. I was talking about it today. Some people believe 14 tons, 12 tons, and such outdated measurements as well.
So let's give it this. Let's do it this way. And then, Titanoboa, right?
Yeah.
It's a long-ass snake.
Right.
Is the snake bigger than Triceratops?
Exactly. This is the same argument I was making. Like, of course, it's not bigger because it's longer. It's
Is the
definitely longer than
giraffe is the
Triceratops.
giraffe bigger than Triceratops because it's both longer and taller?
And taller. It's taller than the Triceratops,
But
but
is it
it's not
bigger?
bigger. It's not bigger
Exactly.
because
So
it's,
what decides what's bigger, right?
Yeah, it's mass because you don't say the giraffe is the largest land animal today.
Who is the bigger guy? Another example. Who is the bigger
Yeah.
guy? The NBA player
It's
who is like
just-
2 meters tall but relatively slim, like toned and everything, not skinny but like slim-ish, but very
Yeah.
very tall, or a bodybuilder who is at least 3 times as wide but couple heads shorter than him.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you decide which one of them is
3
bigger?
It's just determining by mass, really.
I
don't see
personally
why it's
refer
so
to mass
difficult.
most of the times as well.
Yeah,
and
it's just completely fine. Like that's why
Yeah.
we consider elephants to be bigger than giraffes and pythons.
now, according to our good friend and special guest, Francisco,
Yeah.
you know
love that
Franois,
guy.
known as Franois, he has featured
Yeah.
on my channel. You have met
him.
him. Well, sort
Yeah,
of met him. And,
I've spoken to him a few times.
Okay, yeah, cool. And he's from Spain, and he has also made very interesting reconstructions. And one thing that
Yeah.
I couldn't help but noticing is, if we believe, let's assume for a second that if his results are consistent, because he used a very similar methodology like Cartman, so the results
Yeah.
were very similar in some cases
Yeah.
where they both intercepted, like in the same specimens where they were reconstructing, their results came out to be quite consistent.
Exactly.
Which leads me to believe that if two people come to very similar conclusions using very detailed methodology, there is a chance that it might be accurate until a better methodology gets invented.
Yeah.
So if we stick to that and just take that for granted for a second, all of his Tyrannosaurus adult specimens, including the young adult specimens, do you know what's funny about them? They
What
are
is?
all consistently heavier in mass than this Giganotosaurus specimen and taller at the hips.
Right.
So there we go.
Yeah. Hopefully, this does wake a few more people up on how to determine how large certain animals are. And yeah,
Okay.
and hopefully people leave outdated estimates behind.
Okay, so we've got a question coming in. So I just wanted to say, after I address Dino Hazard's question, do we have any more questions left unaddressed or points of concern? Because after this, I literally will have to go. Because I'm
Alright.
already a little bit
Nah,
late. I
I
had to write them a
don't
message,
think
but
so.
I want to make sure that we don't leave this hanging, okay? I like to address
Alright.
everything that I can, but we are limited in time, just so I say...
Then I have one last question.
You
will
have
these
this question.
kinds
Okay, hold on. Keep it there. Remember it,
Yeah.
write it down, because I need to answer this one, because this guy came before
Right.
you, so I just want to make sure that we can address everything, and then we can wrap
Right,
up.
that's fair. Yeah,
So,
completely fair.
what's your opinion on people who make videos on YouTube and claim to be a scientist or says they work with science?
Is this
well-
directed towards everyone here, or?
It's a question to me. What's my opinion
Alright.
towards people make videos on YouTube and claims to be science? Well, I mean, it depends what the context is. I mean, like, does it really make any difference? That would be my counter question. Does it make any difference whether they claim to be scientists or not? Because it doesn't matter who he is or she or whatever. What matters is what is the argument and how the conclusion is achieved. Does it really mean that it's relevant? I think it's irrelevant. But that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's personally, I think it doesn't matter whether people think or claim to be something. It doesn't speak anything to me. Like, I had this
Yeah.
very interesting interaction with somebody on Facebook, and it was like, it was under the Saurian's latest, T-Rex model. We are not going to get into the details here, but the main point is to address is not even that. I wasn't even doing much. All I was doing is I noticed that this guy who shared the post, he kept saying, this is the scientific reconstruction, this is the scientific reconstruction. He was like just copying and pasting this response. It's like he was spamming it. Literally to every comment that was being made there, he was spamming that same response. And I just wrote to him saying something like, can you please explain to me what does this mean to you? Like, what does it... I didn't say just in general, but I mean, what does this mean to you in particular when you say scientific reconstruction? What does it mean to you? He said something that's completely irrelevant, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fair and square, but that's not what my question was. What does it mean to you? Like, and why is it important to appeal to authority in your case? Is that what determines that a scientist said that's okay, and therefore that's what it is? Is that what makes the distinction or not? And then he ignored it completely. And then I decided, you know what, I'll just jab him a little bit just to be a bit of an annoying prick, and I just went with it. And I said, hey, would you mind answering my question? I mean, it's not like it's something crazy, right? I mean, unless you don't want to, that's okay. Just say that you don't want to, but I'm just a little bit unsure. Is that too difficult or something? And you know what happened next? He blocked me.
Next?
So the question must have been difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, so next one is three-horn face. Your turn next, and then I will address this other one Torvo posted, I think, unless Scorpio had something queuing up. I can't remember.
Right. So my question is: will things like this be a regular thing? Just a bunch of people talking in voice chat with you about these things? Because this is really enjoyable. I really enjoy this.
Yeah,
these
same here.
conversations. So will this be like a regular thing, maybe, or?
I think we can totally make this a regular thing as long as everybody...
Yeah,
well, you already know, like, most people can make it, basically. That's the most important thing. Because a lot of times we will find that some people will have different timetables, and especially some of our American friends like Josh and Jeffrey, Jason. Yeah, different timeline completely.
Yeah. If they could join in on these kinds of things, I would be like...
If you want, I can try to see if I can make this arranged somehow, but we can try. I will try to see if I can do something about it.
Because that would be insane. I would love that.
If you can basically stay awake till late at night without just going completely, dead by that time, then... Because me and Josh, for example, we have like 7 hours difference. He's in Los Angeles area and I'm in London area. So for me, basically, to do it in the evening, it means it's an early start for him. And for him, doing it like midday or whatever, or slightly like later afternoon, means it's almost late at night here for me.
Mm-hmm.
And those who are in European Union-based countries, like in the Netherlands, etc., because I know you're from Netherlands, there are like people from Spain, Portugal, etc., anywhere in Europe, France, Romania, and you will have at least a couple more hours ahead of that as well.
Yeah.
So... Yeah, to answer this, yes, I think we should make it a regular thing. I don't know how well we'll be able to accommodate it, but I think we can at least do it this way. And I'm not currently pursuing the goal of making it ultra professional, fancy looking, because you can see it's just my screen here and you can see all of my stuff here. So, I mean, the whole point is the conversation here. So people can notice all sorts of details and make fun of it if they want to. I don't care. It's fine. But there's not a lot to make fun of anyway, but whatever. But the point is that, yes, we can make it a regular thing.
Yeah, it's at least worth a try.
It's worth a try, yes. Now, I want to answer, what's your reaction to this Juvie Rex sculpt that just got posted? That's Beast of the Mesozoic. Okay, so it's the articulated figurine in the general chat.
That's a nice figurine.
Yeah, I saw this earlier on Facebook. I
have my first few concerns. First of all, I am not sure what's going on with the eyebrows and socket area and what specimen is that based on and whether it's in the correct place. It seems like it's kind of sticking on the top too much and not quite in the right place. I don't know, I just didn't see it that way personally. And I can see that they've done lips, which is an oh-no from me. The detail is great. You know, there you can see the scale texture. If you open up the image, it's good. But again, the fact that they went with lips, that proves that they decided to subscribe to the trend.
Yeah.
And good on them, but as I said many times, I don't care about figurines, I care about model kits. And so that's where I stand.
It's just me, or are the arms too short?
Arms too short, maybe, for a juvenile, a little too beefy and too short, so they could just be a bit longer, maybe. And there may be some other things.
I think they were too long, to be honest.
I thought they seemed a bit too short, because if you look at Jane, for example, and Bloody Mary, they have quite elongated.
Yeah,
organs.
very
Yeah, I
elongated arms,
guess.
yeah. Because
So it
the
only
juvenile
have-
proportions always have smaller heads and
Yeah.
Longer
taller
arms.
and longer limbs and shorter tails.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
So, last one. Anybody else have anything else, or shall we just thank our listeners who are kind enough to stick around, or also those who will be watching this later when it comes out on the channel, and just call it a day? Or you have one last question to finish up?
From the sounds of things, I think calling it a day.
I think I think this is a good note to finish it on, just generally.
Yeah, exactly, I agree.
And okay, so I'll just address some few people. So, Scorpio, are you happy with everything so far? Are you happy?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad I was able to answer your questions. I am glad that you were able to make time for coming to the conversation. In fact, if it wasn't for you, we would not have come up with this idea, to be honest. So, you kind of made this happen.
You can thank me for that. You're welcome, by the way.
No problem. So yeah, you can always do this, first. You know how you always go in my videos. You say first, because you're the one who always jumps in first on my videos.
So you remember me.
Well, because
no, I'm just kidding.
There's like this big. Okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Let me do this. Okay, let me do this. So imagine you have this, comment, and it says all in uppercase letters, first. I think that says enough. It's very easy to remember. One word, big letters, very easy to remember. Okay, so
yes, absolutely.
Guys, once again, thanks for joining those who have tuned in, and let's
wash your hands.
Yeah, wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Blow your
stay
nose.
Safe.
Be nice to your family and stay safe.
Indeed.
And I suppose.
Good evening, good day to all.
Yeah, have a good evening as well. The rest of you have fun, do some hobby, do some reading as well. Important, read books as well. And we'll see you later, and we'll do this again. And let me know in the general chat on the Discord server or in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube as well, to make sure how you perceive this. Do you like these kind of things? Do you want this to be a thing? Do you want me to invite Josh, Jeffrey, Jason, and everybody else from America? And all of this kind of good stuff. So shall we make this a thing? And I say, I personally vote aye. I think everyone else here would agree. Yeah, aye. Yeah. So let's make this a thing. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.
Adios.